Folks, thanks for coming out tonight. Very informal. This is going to be a lot of fun. I usually am stuck behind a microphone. I often have audiences that require amplification. This is a living room audience. I'll take this any day. So I'm sorry we got rained out. I'm sorry it's not out in the big amphitheater. But the plus side is I think you're going to be able to see this a lot better. I think you'll be able to hear me quite well. And yeah, so we're here to celebrate the 125th anniversary of state parks this year. It's also the 85th anniversary of CCCs, which if you were here today, you know all about. So I want to kick right off with a song, and then I'll talk more about who I am and why I'm here tonight. There we go. Well, some men love the ocean and they spend a life at sea. I need a forest, a life in the trees. Home is where the heart is, find your heart a good home. My heart is in the woodland, lost and alone. In the woods where the highway can't be heard, I hear the sound of quiet in the absence of words. For I belong and I belong here still. God made me a ridge runner in these rolling hills. Well, when I was a young lad, my parents told me then. They said, go out in the woods, find yourself, young man. First it was to hunt and fish, and then deeper lessons came. There I sit all grown up, searching just the same. In the woods where the highway can't be heard, I hear the sound of quiet in the absence of words. For I belong and I belong there still. God made me a ridge runner in these rolling hills. Well, the mountains are a mystery the longer that you stay. They will roll their way in your soul deeper each day. And even if you leave, they'll remain in your heart, in the way the world sees you and how you see the world. Deep in the woods where the highway can't be heard, I hear the sound of quiet in the absence of words. For I belong and I belong here still. God made me a ridge runner in these rolling hills. Woo. Yeah. Hey! All right, thanks for that warm welcome. So I heard a lot of comments as your familiar parks came up, and I heard people naming things like Heiner and whatnot. So these are some of the parks in the first video, and there's going to be a lot more parks featured in some of these. My wife and kids there. So my name is Wagner, and I come from Danville, Pennsylvania, not far from Knoebels, just down the Susquehanna River. I teach high school at Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Next week, you have to call me Mr. Wagner. But on summertime, I'm still just Van. So here's what happened. At the farm show, of all places, I bumped into some familiar faces with DCNR last farm show. And I said, hey, I'm coming up on eligibility to do a sabbatical where I could take an entire year off from the classroom, but I have to do something professional development-wise in environmental education. I said, hey, is there something I could do where I get to go to all state parks? And they said, well, I don't know about all state parks, but if you can put together a program celebrating our 125th anniversary, you're up this year. So we kind of came up with a hybrid. I didn't take any time off of school. I'm still a school teacher. But this summer, I've been traveling all over places like tonight here, Promised Land. Jump over some of these and get to what really matters, which is where my heart's at. Lifelong sportsman, absolutely love Pennsylvania Wilds. That's me with my son Calvin on the left after he helped me get a turkey. And my brother Ollie, he's a pastor. He used to be a pastor in Montoursville. He's now in a small little town called Atlanta, Georgia. Can you imagine going from Montoursville to Atlanta, Georgia? And he caught that bass with my son Luke. Luke's turned into quite a fisherman. That's Luke on the right with a trout he caught recently in Kettle Creek State Park. And that's me when I was 12 with a trout I caught in Kettle Creek State Park. So I have a lot of passion about Pennsylvania history and the environment. And a few years ago, 2013, the Game Commission partnered with me and had me create a program on the 100th anniversary of elk in Pennsylvania. We say 100th anniversary because they had been gone by the 1870s. We brought them back in 1913. So in 2013, I did a 100th anniversary program. And I only mention that because now and then I find folks in my audience, they go, oh, we saw that guy in Benazet. Yeah, I was that guy. Same sideburns. Here's our Pennsylvania state parks. And I just like starting off with some numbers because it really is worth celebrating. We started in 1893 with our first park. Hopefully I didn't give it away on that slide. Good. What was our first park? You don't have to raise your hand. Feel free to just guess. If I hear it, I'll call you. If I don't hear the right answer, I'm not going to point at you and laugh. Okay, hold that thought. That gives you a few more seconds to listen. When I get to a future slide, you're going to get the answer. I will give you this much of a hint. It is no longer a state park. That's your hint. Valley Forge! Where'd it come from? Impressive. Impressive. You're going to get more information on our first park in just a moment. But what I wanted you to see is we went from one park to 121 parks. I'm just curious, can any of you claim to have been to all of them? I can't. I think that'd be a pretty cool thing to someday be like, I've done them all. I'd say I'm half-ish. But this program that I'm going to do for you isn't going to start in 1893. We're going to hang out here for the next about 50 minutes, 45, 50 minutes. I need to take you back to before 1893 so you can appreciate 1893. To me, that's the most exciting part of this whole history, is that Pennsylvanians had a revolution in mindset and in the 1890s started calling for conservation. You can't quite appreciate that unless you remind yourself what the history of the 1800s and 1700s was. So let's back up a little bit. People for a long time looked at nature, and let's call it what it is. Most state parks are in the middle of nature, not all, but many. And they looked at areas like this as nothing more than a place to go out and get a resource that's worth money. Okay, in this case, I'm talking about market hunters, okay? People that went out and killed for profit. You and I still use this term, making a killing. Okay, making a killing, making a lot of money. It goes back to these guys. They would go out. I just finished a fabulous book. If this subject interests you, you need to read The Long Hunt, Death of the Buffalo East of the Mississippi. It's a fabulous book about buffalo east of the Mississippi. We have our own chapter about whether or not we even had buffalo here in Pennsylvania, and that's all I'm going to say on that right now. I'm not going to. If you're like, so what's the answer? I'm not going to tell you. But the book is riddled with numbers that make my jaw hit the floor. For example, it was not uncommon for a market hunter to have several dozen bear, several dozen elk, several hundred deer by the end of a season. And I'm referring to the ones they actually got. Who knows how many they didn't get. And if they were lucky, they were able to bring those hides and the tallow and some fresh meat into the towns and sell it. So I can't claim to be a descendant of any market hunters that I know of. But my great-grandfather, who's hiding in this picture, give you a moment to try and pick him out. Tall, lanky, big nose like me, big ears like me. My great-grandfather used to hang out with market hunters. And some of the guys that hunted with him at his hunting camp had been market hunters in the old days. And they told stories about how they'd go out for days at a time and they'd hunt in a giant circle and then they'd hunt inward until someone cut a track. And then they'd follow that track to whatever made it and kill it. And then they'd keep going until they'd all join in, and sometimes they'd split whatever it is they all got together. So point, where do you see a tall link? Oh, yeah, I think you can nail him. Is this the guy you're looking at? Yeah. Good answer. That's great-granddad. Yeah, here, let's see if I can. Great-granddad. He was, I don't know what kind of hunter he was, but he was the first Ford dealer in Montour County, Pennsylvania, I can tell you that. So let's keep these guys in mind as we jump back into our history, because I think that's going to be an important part to appreciate the 1890s if we remember this story. Let's go back before that, though. Another song and a video I love sharing with people. This is a song about the walking purchase, which is a story of how Native American land was taken from them and turned into what you and I call Pennsylvania. Well, if we're going to talk about state parks, and we're going to talk about the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, shouldn't we talk about how this land became Pennsylvania. So I think we need to get into that. You can see the different land purchases on this map. You're going to see it in the video as well. But this song is going to talk about this little chunk right there, 1737. You learned it when you were in middle school. It's called the walking purchase. How far a man walked in a day and a half, and then a right angle from there, and all that land was to be taken from the Native Americans, Lenape people, Delaware Indians, and became Pennsylvania. Well, listen to how far the man went in a day and a half in this song. It's really incredible. There were 3 runners. I want you to listen to what happened to all 3 runners in this song. There will be a quiz afterwards. I'm a school teacher. What did you expect? All right, let's make sure I got this. 3 woodsmen known for being fast, promised land and money if they passed. The Indians could hardly keep up, and said they never smoked a pipe or stopped to hunt. It started at the old chestnut tree, sunrise September 19. 2 hours and Jennings was done. He never recovered from his run. Run, Yates, run up the Delaware. 65 miles, not half of them fair. I don't fault you, it's just a hired man. In 37, we stole that land. On day 2 it was Marshall and Yates. We had till noon of that day. Yates fell after a while. Marshall ran 65 miles. That day, Yates lost his sight. 3 days later, Yates lost his life. Marshall made it to Mark Chunk. At the end to a sapling he clung. Run, Yates, run up the Delaware. 65 miles, not half of them fair. I don't fault you, it's just a hired man. In 37, we stole that land. New Tamis felt betrayed by the deal. Friends and brothers, they never cheat and steal. Marshall never got his land, or the money that was promised by the pen. Oh, his payback, it took a different form. Indians attacked him on his farm. His son and later his wife, they paid for the purchase with their life. Run, Yates, run up the Delaware. 65 miles, not half of them fair. I don't fault you, it's just a hired man. In 37, we stole that land. As promised, here comes a quiz. How far did he go? 65 miles, folks. So, I don't want to get too bogged down in the politics and the controversy behind the walking purchase. I think we touched on that enough. But my goodness, you have to just pause for a minute and go, 65 miles in moccasins, through the woods, through the creeks, and he slept under a hemlock tree at night, not a Holiday Inn. My sons and I were curious, and yes, they were the ones kind enough to portray Native Americans in the picture. We looked up Guinness World Book of Records. What's the Guinness record for in one day? How far has a man or woman run? And I believe the record was like 85 miles. In Reeboks, drinking Gatorade, and sleeping at a Holiday Inn. So I mean, come on, that's an incredible feat, and I wanted to have that captured in that song. There were 3 runners. Let's see if you caught what happened to all of them. I'll give you the first one. Jennings passed out after the first few hours, and I was told, or I've read, that he never did regain his health. He was pretty much, his knees were shot, his health was ruined. The guy I named the song after went blind. Yates said he ran so hard he went blind, and 3 days later, what happened to him? Dead. I'm no sports medicine expert, but folks, you got to push a 20-something-year-old's body pretty hard to have them run themselves to death in 3 days. Marshall makes it 65 miles. Native Americans are mad, understandably, because there goes a lot of their land. You saw the map. They didn't think that was the deal they had agreed to. So they're mad. So they take it out on the only person they can, the guy who ran the race. Now that we're kind of setting the stage for the 1700s, let's get to that correct answer, which I heard. Our first park, which is still, of course, 1700s in my program we're talking right now. But the George Washington's headquarters was originally a state park. And who asked for it? Citizens. I think that's one of the coolest parts of this program. You're going to hear that word a lot tonight, citizens. It wasn't that someone just sat in Harrisburg and concocted the idea. It was us. We said this place needs to be protected. And so citizens formed this thing called the Centennial and Memorial Association in 1878. 1893, they created a park. So, but anyway, still in the 1700s with this. That's where I want to go. What are some of the other resources being exploited? Well, timber. My goodness, does that picture say it all? This is actually where I just came from. Well, when I say where I came from, I was at a lumber and coal heritage festival all day in Bradford County. And we looked at pictures like this all day long of a place called Barkley Mountain. And it was it later became a CCC camp called, some people call it LaQuinn. It's LaQuinn, I learned today. They were the locals telling me how to say it. I was like, oh, okay. But they took everything. In the lumber era, it was the white pine that was valuable. They took the hemlock for the bark, because the bark made tannic acid for leather. That's why it's your state tree, because you could make tannic acid out of it, and it made a lot of money for people that own tanneries. You know, this was statewide. This is how we treated the forest. The smaller hardwoods were going into the mines for prop timber. And don't forget this. Now, maybe we can't relate to it quite as much here because we're so close to anthracite coal. But closer down to southern Pennsylvania, their furnaces, in most cases, were fired by charcoal. It took an acre a day. Let that number settle in. It took an acre a day of forest to run one iron furnace. So, I mean, to give you a for example, my hometown of Danville had about 24 iron furnaces. And I bet half the people in this room have never even been to Danville. That's how small of a town it is. All right, I have been. Oh, I forgot about Geisinger. Some of you have been there more than you want to. My point is, there were furnaces all over this state. I mean, if you want an approximate list, there's one gentleman that has a really neat website, voluntarily. He's trying to catalog all of Pennsylvania's iron furnaces. Last I looked, he's at like 440 iron furnaces. We're not even talking steel yet, folks. These are iron furnaces. So those that were not coal-fired were charcoal-fired, consuming an acre a day. You can't treat the woods that way forever. You just cannot treat the forest and the wildlife. The market hunters were doing the same thing. I will tell you this. When I mentioned my elk program, people were always asking me, well, who killed the last elk and when? I don't have an exact answer because there's actually several last elk. Here's what I can tell you, folks. Every quote-unquote last elk that was thought to be the last elk made the front page of the newspapers at the time, not as a heartbreak, not as a, oh, we lost the elk, as a Mr. So-and-so, the hero sportsman from, they'd call him sportsman, marksman, the hero marksman from Clinton County killed the last elk. People looked at nature as a thing to conquer in the 1860s and 70s. And so, conquer it, they did. This is one of my favorite pictures because I can see a group of people in this picture that I spend a lot of time with. I teach high school, right? I teach teenagers. You see the teenagers in this picture?
Yes.
They're on the top of the pile, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. Oh, it's seriously incredible. Just to give you a size and scope of what we're talking about here. So those of us that practice sustainable forestry today, this was not sustainable. Not at all. So I'm going to do another song with a video I think you'll enjoy. A lot of the footage you're about to see in this next song has never been released to the public that I'm aware of. And it's some really beautiful black and white footage that was given to a Penn State professor of mine on VHS. He had a copy of it, and he let me copy it. So it's a copy of a copy of a copy converted to a digital file. So forgive me if it's not crystal clear, but it's still precious. It's still incredible. The song is from the 1860s. I wrote this song, but I mean the story is supposed to be 1860s, but I'm going to confess to you, the footage is probably 1920s or 1930s, but it's still a crosscut saw. It's still horses, and it's still the double bit axe. Enjoy. This is one of my favorites to share with people. Was over, Mr. Lincoln had won. I drew my Navy wages and returned to my home. To Sullivan County where my grandfather came. The soil was rocky and the sky always rained. I remember Grandpa's stories of when he was a kid, of bison in some lowlands and elk on the ridge. But now they're all gone and a new hunt has begun to find the tie-a-dot and make the sawmills hum. All I need is my crosscut saw, my double bit axe and 80 trees to fall. The spring, it's coming, I can smell it all around. My soul's being tempted by that high water sound. Up on the loyal sock, it's straight and it's tall. There is pine up there like you ain't never saw. Only brave loggers bear the winter cold, and the snow falls heavy on that Appalachian fold. Well, it's up in the morning at 5 a.m. Throw down some biscuits, some coffee and ham. A 12-hour shift with the teamster crew, skidding logs in the water through the ice and snow. All I need is my crosscut saw, my double bit axe and 80 trees to fall. The spring, it's coming, I can smell it all around, and my soul's being tempted by that high water sound. But we lash our logs together with hickory and oak. No rope, no iron, just pins and bows. A sweep at the front and back and a shack for the crew. 20,000 board feet, ready to tie loose. When the ice finally breaks and the water's good and high, we'll head down the loyal sock, our crew of 5. A day on the raft down to Montoursville. We hit the Susquehanna where the water's smooth and still. All I need is my crosscut saw, my double bit axe and 80 trees to fall. The spring, it's coming, I can smell it all around. My soul's being tempted by that high water sound. Once we get to Marietta, we sell off our logs, $100 split by 5 river hogs. We head back north, walking all the way, with a hand on your knife and the other on your pay. Well, if it's a good season, we'll have 2 or 3 more runs. Then this year is over and summer has begun. I'll watch as the rust, it builds upon my tools, and I long for the day I'm back with my logging crew. All I need is my crosscut saw, my double bit axe and 80 trees to fall. The spring, it's coming, I can smell it all around. My soul's being tempted by that high water sound. Awesome footage.
Yeah.
I did put most of these videos, if not all, are available on YouTube. I figured, well, someone will sue me and then I'll figure out who owns the rights to that video. It didn't work out that way. But let's keep going with this natural resource exploitation. You're no stranger to this, northeastern Pennsylvania. Abandoned coal lands. Now this picture actually came from the Western Pennsylvania Coalition of Abandoned Mine Reclamation. We have a lot of coal in this state. In fact, I'll show you a map in a moment. But when some of our mountains and valleys started to look like this, when some of our streams and wetlands started to look like this, when some of our hillsides started to fill up with this. Now, I grew up calling that Colm, and if you're from northeastern Pennsylvania, it's Colm. Western Pennsylvanians call it Boney. And I figured out the dividing line is the same between pop and soda. Whoopie pies, do you know what they call them out west? Gobs, G-O-B-B-S, gobs. I was at a friend's house out in western Pennsylvania in my college years. And knock, knock, knock. A little Girl Scout comes to the door. She wasn't selling cookies. She said, "Do you want to buy any gobs?" And I said, "What are you selling? Is that even legal? What is this?" And she showed them to me, and I go, "Oh, whoopie pies." And she looked at me like I was from outer space. She never heard of whoopie pies. I never heard of gobs. Here's our map. I love maps. And Pennsylvania has an incredible amount of coal. I used to be a coal miner. In 2001, I worked in Schuylkill County. Right there. Here's the Wyoming Valley. This is all the anthracite. You want to hear something incredible? This is 98% of the anthracite on planet Earth. Isn't that amazing? I'm a fan of numbers. Let that number settle in tonight when you're laying in your sleeping bag. Or your hammock. I'm jealous. Somebody had a hammock up here when I went for a walk. That was pretty cool. I just came from Bradford County, Barkley Mountain Coal. This is what they were celebrating today. And I had a double-edged sword message for them. I said, "Folks, see this right here? That's your bubble, right?" I said, it was a big festival today. I said, "This whole festival today is about your bubble. Now look at all the other bubbles. You're just one bubble in the story of a big story of coal." Pennsylvania coal is such a huge part of our history. So, I mean, look, incredible. Down here, I believe, is it Shawnee State Park? You're really close to the Broad Top Coal Field, a place I want to get to. I could tell some of you were skeptics when I said I used to be a coal miner. There I am. Happiest guy you'll ever see in the mines. That's me on the right. That's my buddy Wayne on the left. And I worked in Schuylkill County. I had just been married, and I found a temporary teaching job as a substitute in Pine Grove School District. And then when they were done with it was a 3-month science position. When they were done with me, they said, "Well, you can stay on as a day-to-day sub." I was like, "No, I remember how I treated my day-to-day subs." And one of my students said, "Well, Dad has a coal hole. You want to work for Dad?" I said, "Yeah." So she took me after school up there. I am in a tie. And he comes out of the mine. He looks at me. He goes, "What? You want to work in a coal mine?" I said, "A job's a job." And he said, "You go get your papers and I'll hire you." And I did, folks. I went and got my 40 hours of training. And in my high school classroom at Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, there's my certificate of Bachelor's of Science from Penn State University. And right next to it is my Department of Mines, Deep Mine Training, Van Wagner. I'm a laborer, not a miner. But let's celebrate that a little bit here. The story of our anthracite mining is going to tie in to the story of the CCCs and the story of state parks. So I want to celebrate our coal mining heritage as well. This is called the bootleg miner. At a poker game 5 years ago, I sat across a man. His hair was gray and weathered, he had black marks on his hands, and a black scar that cut its way across his left eye. I forgot about the poker game and began to ask him why. He said Shamokin, Pennsylvania, the Great Depression had come around. There was nothing great about it, picking coal underground. And I had a stick of time go off premature. I was a bootleg coal miner years before the war. So take me down underground, oh take me down below. Gonna oil up the buggy for it's time to shoot some coal. When your family gets hungry, you'll do anything for work. And I carved out a living from the Pennsylvania dirt. Well, in those years in the anthracite fields, it was hard to find a job. The company mines were closing down and the miners were laid off. There was no such thing as welfare back in those days. We worked our days in a bootleg hole and in the evenings we prayed. Well, bootlegging was different, for the coal wasn't really ours. Had to hide out from the company and hoped you didn't get caught. For if they found your workings, they would cut your heist in rope. They would dump your coal back in the ground and they would dynamite your slope. So take me down underground, oh take me down below. Gonna oil up the buggy for it's time to shoot some coal. When your family gets hungry, you'll do anything for work. And I carved out a living from our Pennsylvania dirt. Well, now and then in hard times, I think of this man, and I forget about my problems, and I try to understand that my troubles, they ain't nothing compared to the life of a bootleg coal miner for his children and his wife. So take me down underground, oh take me down below. Gonna oil up the buggy for it's time to shoot some coal. When your family gets hungry, you'll do anything for work. And I carved out a living from our Pennsylvania dirt. That song takes place in the Depression era. So hold that thought. We're going to come back to those guys when I talk about the CCCs. But mostly what I wanted to set the stage for, folks, was the entire public here in Pennsylvania through the late 1700s and early mid-1800s saw nature as a box of resources to be cashed in on. Whether it was the minerals, whether it was the forest, or it was the wildlife. And so by the 1890s, a different type of Pennsylvanian started to surface. And these are the real heroes in the story, I think. A type of Pennsylvanian that looked at nature differently. And the first thing they called for was to protect the shad, migratory fish that on the Susquehanna River we've all but lost. Those of you from eastern Pennsylvania are lucky enough to still have shad in the Delaware watershed. They're migratory, so the dams really have hammered the shad populations where I live. So the Fish and Boat Commission was the first thing they created. A few decades later, we Pennsylvanians asked for the creation of game laws, and we created the Game Commission. Again, it wasn't some idea hatched in Harrisburg. It was hatched in hunting cabins and breakfast groups over a cup of coffee. People going, we need to do something. We lost the elk. You know, we're losing the white-tailed deer, and that's why we came up with the first ever game laws. So how does it relate to parks? Well, this guy is another hero in our story, Dr. Joseph Rothrock. Okay, he was our first commissioner of forestry. That commissioner of forestry is going to become Pennsylvania Department of Forest and Waters, which is going to become state parks and what we know as DCNR. So this is sort of like our godfather, so to speak, here in state parks. And he, another picture of him. Again, you're seeing some of the terms changed. One of the things that I found interesting is he was a medical doctor, and one of the things that brought him to forestry was the idea that maybe it could be healthy for people. Some of his patients could maybe benefit from time in the woods. Well, that's a whole different way of looking at the forests. If you paid attention to the last 20 minutes, the forest was to be cut down and cashed in on. It was to be harvested and killed and brought to market. It was to be dug, strip mined, and brought to market. So this was a whole different way of thinking. So this mindset, I feel like, is the most important part of this whole program, I feel like. Like, we wouldn't have a 125th anniversary to celebrate had our ancestors in the 1890s not said, stop business as usual, we need to treat nature differently. It's still okay to harvest, but we have to do it in a more balanced, sustainable, foresighted manner. And that, I think, is such an important part of the story. Now let's bounce into what that song was about, the Great Depression, and what this weekend up here at Promised Land is all about, the CCCs. Can you imagine how hard it was on this area? I mean, people talk about the Great Depression. It was bad everywhere, but when your entire valley pretty much relies on one resource, anthracite coal, when we're talking about the Wyoming Valley, and pretty much everybody's mom or dad had a job related back to the health of the anthracite industry. When that thing started going belly up in the 1920s, and the Scranton Iron and Steel Works as well, I mean, it was an absolute catastrophe in this area. Nobody had a backup source of employment. Boom, boom, bring along the CCCs. Talk about the perfect medicine at the perfect time. The CCCs, the Civilian Conservation Corps, ran from 1933 through 42, and we had hundreds of thousands of unemployed men who were able to come and get a job serving their country. And at the time, many of them didn't realize the longevity of their efforts. It was just a job because the money got sent back home. It was something to help the family out during the Great Depression. But look at you and I still enjoying their legacy today. I mean, they literally practically built the state park system. And if we could go back 85 years ago and interview the 18-year-old and ask them, do you realize? They would be like, no, I'm just doing it for, the pay that gets sent home. Plus they're teaching me a trade. I'm learning how to be a carpenter. I'm learning how to be a stonemason or whatever it may be. So it's just really incredible. Pennsylvania, second in the country with our number of camps. We had 151 camps, second only to... Is it up there? Are you cheating? Darn it! All right. I said no cell phones on the quiz. Oh, wait, no, that's next week. Yeah, right there it is. California had us beat. And this is where I was earlier today, and I'll teach you, again, the proper pronunciation of that town is not LeQuinn, it's LeQuinn, LeQuinn. So I'm telling it to you right from the Bradford County locals, LeQuinn. It was two names put together. There was Mr. Quinn and Barclay, but LeQuinn. So there they are. So what I want to do is just celebrate the CCC story with this next song. I'm going to let the pictures tell the story. And if you watch carefully, you're going to see some real local pictures here. The song I'm going to pick to honor these guys is called Lost in the Mountains. And it's a song I wrote about just that. Sometimes you're at a crossroads in your life, and a trip into the wilds of Pennsylvania is sometimes all you need to be reborn and recharged and find your way again. And I feel like that's exactly what these guys were doing. They were out-of-work coal miners. They were out-of-work farm boys. They were out-of-work steel workers. And they not only served their country, they served their family. They were doing this to have money get sent home and keep the family from going under in the Great Depression. So I think some of them found themselves in the process too. I learned something new about them today. During last Super Bowl, there was a World War II veteran who tossed the quarter. He was a CCC boy. Yeah, I forget his name, but he was also a CCC boy. All right, this is called Lost in the Mountains. A tune for Ricketts Glen, a song from the trail, water falls when it can, and it freezes when it will. Well, I've known it all my life. Red rock, blue sky. There's a truth in these trees. There's a truth that'll set you free. A soul will search the mountains 1,000 times or more. You turn and face the valley 1,000 times o'er. And I've seen it up on Montage Ridge and also Ricketts Glen. You must get lost in the mountains to find your way again. Well, it happened to my dad. It was the Loyal Sock Trail. He helped us hike into our camp. Then he returned to the trail. He set out all alone. his flashlight shining low. Just him and the dark. A faint highway sound led him to his car. A soul will search the mountains 1,000 times or more. You turn and face the valley 1,000 times over. And I've seen it up on Montage Ridge and also Ricketts Glen. You must get lost in the mountains to find your way again. Well, I know it's in the cards. Comes a time I'll be off track. But sometime in the woods, it is bound to bring me back. I'll set a course to get lost. I'll find a creek never crossed. I'll set my mind at ease, surrounded by the mountains, the stones, and the creek. A soul will search the mountains 1,000 times or more. You turn and face the valley 1,000 times over. And I've seen it up on Montage Ridge and also Ricketts Glen. You must get lost in the mountains to find your way again. If nothing else, if you were skeptical when you saw the shirtless statue down the road, you just saw the real thing. They're all shirtless in the hot sun. Awesome, awesome pictures. DCNR forester Gerald Hoy is the gentleman who gave me most of the pictures you saw. So, just a really fascinating time. So, a couple other pictures I just want to show you. A couple CCC photos. But the real special picture that I wanted to share with you that's me. I got that same miner's hat in my car right now. So Allison, I wanted to ask, the gentleman who was here today, do you mind saying his name again, the CCC boy?
He's Cornelius McHugh.
Does anyone recognize Cornelius McHugh from that photo? Because this photo was taken here at Promised Land, 1999. While you're looking, I'm going to share with you a memory from 19 years ago. When this picture was being taken, I remember always getting down. First of all, I wasn't supposed to be in the picture, but all the old guys are going, get the coal miner, we like him. Get the guitar guy, and what an honor. And as I got down, I remember I'm used to cameramen saying, say cheese. And the cameraman said something like, say cheese. You should have heard what these guys said. All I'm going to say is it was all kinds of things I can't repeat. They went right back to being teenagers again, is what I'm trying to tell you. It was cute. It really was neat. There are these, when that picture was taken, there are these 70-something-year-old men, and they sounded like they were 18 again, horsing around at the camp for boys. It was just incredible. Any luck finding Cornelius? If not, I'll get you a better resolution picture.
I think it's either this fellow here,
okay,
or it could be this fellow here. And let's see Cornelius today. Yeah, what do you think? You think it's like this guy? I think it's this is Cornelius here. I have a feeling.
Not the guy with red suspenders here?
No, that's Smokey.
Okay. Thanks, Allison. So this is a neat homecoming for me tonight, being able to be here on your CCC weekend. Obviously, I've got a little history with the park here. And I just think the whole story is so neat that you can't just tell one piece of the story. So some places have asked me to come do a CCC program. Yes, if you'll let me broaden it. You can't appreciate the CCCs if you don't talk about what those coal miners were doing and the loggers were doing before the bottom fell out on the market. You might think to yourself, what a tough life that would have been. Well, that's probably an upgrade from being a coal miner. The number I throw out today when I was doing my coal mining program, if you would like an approximate number for what did a coal miner make 100 years ago-ish in Pennsylvania, they were still only making about $1 a day. $1 a day. So, Allison, help me out. Do you know what the CCC boys were making per month? Do you recall?
$30. $30.
Thank you. Now, granted, they're also giving you 3 meals and an education, in a sense. You're learning a trade. But, in some cases, this was a better deal than what life had been at home. Let's now get into what's called the Goddard Era. This is pretty fun. This is the era I can relate to in my childhood. I mean, I just grew up, Dad taking us to a new state park every weekend. They were everywhere because of this. The Goddard Era is named so because this gentleman, Dr. Maurice Goddard, had the idea of having a state park within 25 miles of every Pennsylvania citizen. By the way, he was the secretary of the PA Department or Bureau of Forestry, so that was his official title. And I'm actually not sure how close we got to meeting his goal, but I've taken the old Pennsylvania paper DCNR map and looked at it, and I can't find a 25-mile gap. I mean, you can pretty much find a park within 25 miles at every town, big or small. So pretty successful. In that era, 45 parks were added. We're not going to sit here and read off the list, but I just want to show you volume-wise. You know, there's the beginning of my program. There is before the Great Depression or into the Great Depression. Here's the CCCs, and then the Goddard Era takes up the whole rest of the page and all the following page, really. I mean, it's just a huge number of parks. Excuse the typos here or there. But the number of parks added in this era, 50s, 60s, and 70s. I'll back up a page again. I'll back up. You're enjoying the slide more than I expected, so I'm afraid to go past. I hear a lot of chatter. Chatter away, that's great. But this is time to transition to the banjo, because folks, this, if you're going to have a park within 25 miles of people, well, then you're going to have a lot of people-wildlife interactions. And that's exactly what I remember from one of our first trips to a park when I was a kid, was black bears in the campground. Now, Allison told me there's never any more problems whatsoever with black bears ever bothering camp. Oh, I'm kidding. Which is a good time to remind you all to be smart about your food in camp. Be smart. And I also say that for the bear's sake. A fed bear is a dead bear. So please don't train a bear to think humans equal food. We don't. It ends badly for the bear. But on a happier note here, my childhood memory of bears and state parks and Dad. Driving in the Ford Fairmont station wagon, Dad taking us to a park, Kettle Creek probably, and as we went through Lock Haven on Interstate 80, I pointed up on the mountain and there was a bald spot, all rocks, like Hickory Run State Park. And I said, Dad, what's that? And he said, that's a bear spot. I said, what's a bear spot? He said, well, on a full moon, all the bears in the woods get together and they have a dance. And when they dance, they stomp all the blueberry and the hemlocks down, and there's nothing left but a bear spot. I said, Dad, how do you know that? He said, well, my dad told me. So this is a little fun tip of the hat to the Goddard Era, when we started bringing a lot more people to parks and a lot more parks to the people, and the wildlife interactions went through the roof. My brother helped me write this song. This is called Where They Dance. Up on the mountain, you can see it from the road. There's a field of rocks where nothing seems to grow. My dad told me that's a spot on the hill where the bears come to dance when the moon it is filled. Where they dance, where they dance. Where they dance, where they dance. Bears dance, the world is asleep. When the bears dance, they stomp down all the trees. Paws and claws, dust from the pines. They got bellies filled with berries and the truest moonshine. Where they dance, where they dance. Where they dance, where they dance. So if you're out camping on an overnight stay, and you wander from your camp and you find the bears at play, don't take no photos to prove what you saw. Just join in the good time and dance with them all. Where they dance, where they dance. Where they dance, where they dance. and you can see it from the road. There's a field of rocks where nothing seems to grow. My dad told me that's a spot on the hill where the bears come to dance when the moon is filled. Where they dance, where they dance. Where they dance, where they dance. What on earth was chasing the bear out of my yard?
A peacock.
A peacock. Well done, young. That's our peacock, Kevin. Now you know, if you ever wondered who would win, a peacock or a bear, he's chased him out.
Wait, peacock? Bears are scared of peacocks?
All I know is what you saw in the video. That bear sure looked scared to me. He didn't want to fight. He just wanted food. I like sharing this with my audience because I think this is a cool part of our story too. This is right out of our Constitution in Pennsylvania, our Pennsylvania Constitution. The people have a right to clean air, pure water, and to the preservation of natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all people, including generations yet to come. As trustee of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all people. And you'll notice who one of the authors was of that. There's Dr. Goddard again. I love that. I think that's pretty cool. State parks are a lot of different things to a lot of different people, you know? But I like that because I really think it gives a bit of a common vision of what our legislators had in mind as they were creating those 45 parks during the Goddard Era, certainly. I also want to give a tip of the hat to the folks I call the partners. More now than ever, this is not just a DCNR thing. Okay, there are citizen groups out there. Some of you might even be members of some of these. You have Elk Country Alliance, works quite a bit with state parks, closer to the Elk region, Benezet, you know, Elk County, Clinton County. Game Commission is often a partner. I already talked about the elk thing. I got to move on. I'm sorry. Oh, and I want to give a shout out to these fine folks, Parks and Forest Foundation. Your friends groups. Are any of you part of a friends group here? I saw some volunteers. Okay. Do get involved, and if you're not sure how to, I don't know if it's as simple as saying Google your backyard state park, whether it's Promised Land or some other. I think you'd be surprised to learn there's probably a friends group out there, and I'm seeing more and more friends groups funding things and being, you know, boots on the ground, so to speak. Granted, tonight I am funded and sponsored by DCNR. Harrisburg is commissioning me to go around and do this, which is wonderful. But I'll tell you, when I'm just going around doing just concerts and Pennsylvania history programs, more and more it's the friends groups that'll have a fundraiser and then they'll hire me to come in and sponsor me for the day. So please give them some support. And as I wrap up, I do have a very special song. Our mission statement. What is our mission in state parks? To provide opportunities for enjoying healthful outdoor recreation, serve as outdoor classrooms for environmental education. Stewardship responsibilities should be carried out in a way that protects the natural outdoor experience for the enjoyment of current and future generations. And I can relate a little bit to this education side of things because in my classroom at Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, we've partnered with DCNR, Bureau of Forestry, DCNR, as well as the American Chestnut Foundation. We now have a 2-acre chestnut laboratory at Lewisburg High School. To the best of my knowledge, it is the biggest living laboratory of chestnut trees on a public school property in the country. There's my students, a group of them. And it's partnerships. It's partnerships that get the ball rolling, and it's partnerships that continue the things moving forward. The commonality in this whole program has been that citizen behind the scenes, citizens. So please continue to be the proactive citizen. Enjoy some of these hairstyles and clothing styles as we tour through the decades here. I'm channeling those chops, I think, the way I'm going. Look at that. Are those socks back yet? Wait. This is where I was last weekend, Cherry Springs State Park, the Woodsmen show. Golly, is that a classic or what? Can almost see Daffy Duck and yeah. Wow, that's a classic right there. What I don't know is if that was a publicity picture or that just happened to be in someone's personal collection. But this one was given to me by some of the folks in Harrisburg, and I couldn't not use it. That is just awesome. I do have one more song, but I just wanted to walk through some of these pictures because they're just great. You'll notice some of the patches and emblems have changed. Wow. I was here 3 weeks ago performing, literally here. RV winner, Halfway Dam, really neat spot. On Route 192 between Lewisburg and State College. And if I were to say, my childhood park, it was that park. This is where Dad would take us frequently. It's a 25-minute drive. And I can't recall if I learned to swim in the Susquehanna River or at Halfway Dam, but that's honestly where I learned to swim. And my wife makes fun of me because even to this day, I kind of, when I just go to my default swim, it's a doggy paddle with my head out of the water. Because that water's freezing cold. It's not like, I can't shake it. She's like, why do you doggy paddle stuff? Keep my head out of the water. But it is cold. But I stood right on those steps and got to do this program. Oh, and that was fun. Look at those cars. It's just awesome. And I apologize some of these aren't labeled. But... Any guesses where that one is? Do you have a guess? I don't know. I was excited. I thought you knew. I don't know where that one is.
No, I was looking at the outfits.
Oh. This one I know. I'm headed there Labor Day weekend. That's Ohiopyle State Park. If you can picture, if you go to Ohiopyle, this is now a wonderful bridge, a bike and running path. Oh, it's awesome. So going right over the river there, right over the Mon. Oh, no. So the big falls would be, a quarter mile that way is the big fall. That's cool. Laurel Hill, maybe? I know what you're saying. You're the one doing the program. Why are you asking us? I don't know. I mix these pictures up for different groups. There's so many. There's thousands of these pictures. I mean, I can't show them all, so I mix them up. But this is us, folks. This has been a celebration of us, the citizen. We're the ones that keep this ball rolling. And, in my family, it's a generational thing. I don't know about for you all, but, I'm not here by accident. I'm here at a state park, passionate about state parks, passionate about Pennsylvania history because of Dad. Dad's the guy that took me to parks. Mom went along for the ride because Dad was gone. Mom was a townie, but she tolerated it well. So I always tell my audiences, you're not here by accident, folks. You're here because someone, when you were a child, probably said, come on, turn off the TV or the radio, and we're going to a park. We're going for a hike. We're going canoeing today. We're camping out. Or you're married to someone who's like that, right? So one of the other. So in my wife's family, there's our hero. This is my wife's grandfather. Pat Botto. Lived to be 100 years old, former coal miner, World War II veteran, not a CCC boy, but he loved Locust Lake. And he would take his family to Locust Lake, and to this day, we try to spend some time at Locust Lake remembering Pat. He passed away a few years ago, but there he is with my son. There's 4 generations, talk about carrying on the tradition of state park. So when I close this program, and that's what I'm doing, when I close, it's a celebration, but folks, it's also a call to action. If you don't already, would you please think about the young people in your life that you could be including in state parks and, exposing them to it? Now more than ever, they need it. I hear plenty of complaints, but I don't see a lot of action, folks talking about, the screens are always in their face. Well, what are you doing about it? What are you doing about it? And I'm not saying I have all the answers, but let's just be aware. I think step 1, awareness. Awareness. So I'm going to close with a song called The Woolrich Coat, because when I see a Woolrich coat, I think of Dad. I think of hunting season. I think of camping out at Ohiopyle. I think of him telling me about bears dancing on our way to Kettle Creek, Heiner. So let me get to our... Here it goes. Hope you enjoy this one. There are going to be a lot more pictures in this one. That's my niece, Lauren. She likes dogs. 12 years old for the first time, hunting with his dad. He flips his collar up to fight the cold with his red and black plaid. In a drizzling rain, it grows heavy as a stone. But he's keeping warm, he's got his father's Woolrich coat. I thank Dad for the memories and Woolrich for the coat. Hanging on the wall with a patch on the chest, and it smells of mothballs and the old cedar chest. Ah, but my favorite is the game pouch on the back, with feathers of a pheasant or a good rope to drag. I thank Dad for the memories and Woolrich for the coat. Fall mornings I wake early and I put on that wool. I slip my hands in the pocket by the ribs and I go for a stroll. And so it goes for years, daughters and sons. Mr. Rich's coat keeps warm those who keep it on. I thank Dad for the memories and